You know,
There are other survivors.
Hey everybody, welcome to Atheist Impact episode 7. One of these days I'm not going to be surprised when I realize that I've actually made 7 of these, or 8 of these, or 9 of these. But until that day comes, I'm going to continue to have a little bit of a pause and a little bit of a shock that I'm still going on this. Mostly because of the fact that a lot of times when I start these types of projects, I don't follow through, or I end up abandoning it and coming up with an excuse as to why I did. So, what is there to talk about this time? So there are a lot of different things. One of the things that I really feel that I need to do is I need to get caught up on some of my correspondence with people. And one of the problems with corresponding through a podcast is the fact that you guys have to wait 2 weeks before you get any kind of response. And sometimes I actually receive an email about an episode that I had, an episode that I did weeks ago or a month and a half ago. And so then I have to catch up, and it's really hard, and juggling real life and everything else that goes on the internet. I mean, I've said it recently, I've got my fingers in a lot of different pies, and a lot of times it really feels overwhelming. If I did this full time, podcasting, YouTubing, atheist stuff, if I did this full time, I would still probably feel overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that I have going on and the amount of stuff that I actually do and can do. So imagine all of the stuff that I do plus a 40-hour-a-week job. Next week I go on call, which means that I've got to spend an entire week of staying alert and awake enough at night so that if the pager goes off, I can actually hear it and wake up and deal with some random person's problem. So even though my weekend started 2 hours ago or so, 3 hours ago or so, I'm already in this mindset of, oh God, on Monday at 7 p.m. I got to turn on that pager, and then I'm just going to be frazzled for the next week. So I think that has already kicked in. Actually, I know for a fact that's already kicked in. And so there is a possibility that this podcast will only be about half an hour long, if for no other reason, just because I feel a little scatterbrained more than normal, and because I did not have any time, because of work and because of everything else that's been going on, didn't have any time to research any subjects. So, like I said, what I'd kind of like to do is just take a few minutes, and maybe the whole half hour, we'll see. But I wanted to just get back to some of the people that have reached out to me recently. It's been awesome, actually. The people that have taken the time to write me emails, the two people that I'm going to respond to here are, Dougal and Chris. You know who you are, so we're not going to give any more names than that. But they've sent me emails that have given me more information that I've asked for in the podcast, or information to clarify some of my positions, and just to have those conversations that I can't have because this isn't an open dialogue. This is me talking into a microphone in my apartment, and none of you have any way of talking to me except via email or finding me on Twitter or going to YouTube or something along those lines. And so it's kind of tough because I want to have those interactions. I want to have those conversations. It's kind of the reason that I started this. And the hope when I initially started this was to actually do Blog Talk Radio, which is what the Thinking Atheist does his podcast show on. And his is actually live. And I know that, first of all, Seth Andrews has years and years, most of his adult life has been radio. And so the whole, okay, let's flip the switch, start recording, start talking. And if, he's got his fallback plans, he's like, if he starts getting scatterbrained and forgets what he's supposed to be talking about, he can always say, let's go to, live callers and talk to them. And the people on the phones that are calling in have something to talk about. Same thing with Atheist Experience. On the off chance that they don't have anything to talk about, they just say, screw it, and they go straight for the callers. And so that is one thing that I don't have, and the main reason is because Blog Talk Radio, and now I'm wondering if it was Blog Talk Radio. Anyway, doesn't matter. They wanted a little bit more money than I was willing to pay to have a live podcast. Plus, I wasn't really sure if I was going to be able to learn it all quickly enough in order to start this project, and I really wanted to start this project and just get it going. And that's why this is not live. That's why there are no callers. That's why, even though I know that Thinking Atheist, I know that he does actually read comments and emails and messages that he's received, and so that's one of his things. When he's done with the subject that he's going to talk about, he switches to people that are calling in, he talks to them, lets them talk for a while, and then he reads some responses that he's received. So I kind of wanted to take a minute and do that, if for no other reason, just to feel like I'm actually interacting and not make anyone feel like if you send me any kind of feedback or you send me any kind of contact, that I'm ignoring you by any means, or that I'm just moving on and pressing on. And it's really hard, again, with everything I've got going on, to actually get back to everybody. My Facebook account has, I think, 7 messages in the inbox that I keep trying desperately hard to get to, but I don't like being, an asshole and going, hey, thanks, talk to you later, bye-bye now. It just doesn't seem right to me to, I don't ever want to get so caught up in my own success that I ignore the people that make me a success. So, yeah, but it's really hard. So if you're listening and you have sent me a message across any of the avenues that you can send me a message, please do not feel slighted. I am not ignoring you. I make sure that everything stays unread. Even if I do read it, if I don't have time, I just mark it back to unread so that it reminds me every time I log into whatever site I'm on, so that I can actually make sure that I see it, make sure that I go to it. I also save it all because I'm a digital pack rat. So keep that in mind. If you ever send me anything, I will save it forever. And if I ever meet you in person and you said something you shouldn't have said, well, I'll have a copy of it somewhere. So anyway, Dougal, you sent me an email about, in my third podcast, I had talked about the beginning of the universe and the Big Bang and the Big Crunch and the possibility of our universe always existing in some form or another. And I kind of mentioned that I had a hard time understanding the concept of there being the singularity from which our entire universe expanded or came to be at the point of the Big Bang, and how I didn't fully understand how there could not be a time. And I still got to admit, I mean, you sent me these awesome videos, and I watched all of the videos, and they were great, and they were mind-expanding. Whoa. I'm going to have to edit that out. I just hit my pop filter, and I'm got a new microphone, so if I sound a little bit different on this one, or if the volume's a little bit whack, I apologize. I do try to keep all of my settings the same so that I'm always the same volume. Unfortunately, that doesn't always work, and so hopefully I'm not blasting out anybody's ears if you go from one episode to the next episode with headphones on or whatever. But again, I do my best. I just don't always succeed in doing what I'm attempting to do. So, yes, Dougal, the videos that you sent me. As for calling me Xander or Spencer, you're more than welcome to call me Spencer. That's my name. But I'll answer to Xander, too. I'll answer to a lot of different things. And, yeah, but that's, yeah, anyway. So, the videos that you sent me really did help, but I'm still really trying to figure out how there can't be time. And my question, more than anything, is not... I mean, the way that I understand time is that time is the way that we measure the movement of things, the way that we measure cause and effect. And so if you do shrink everything down to an infinitesimally small and infinitesimally dense particle, the singularity, if you shrink it down to that size, there's not a whole lot of movement going on that I can think of. I mean, you don't have molecules interacting with each other. You don't have, comets running into planets. It's not the universe on a miniature scale. It's all of the matter within the universe crushed down into a very small point. And I get that. And so I wonder if that's where I'm not making the connection, is that time is what we use and what we do, or time is what we use to measure the change of state. If I understand that correctly, and then we can back it up to where we can say that the singularity wasn't going through any changes until the Big Bang, then I can understand how there was no time, because there was no change. And because there was no change, then time doesn't make sense. Time, the laws of nature break down. There is no cause and effect in the sense of what we see now in our mostly deterministic universe. So I understand that, and I think that's all I'm missing. I think that I need to get. Part of it also is pop culture. I mean, whenever you see the pictures of the Big Bang and you see the pictures of the singularity, they always show this little amorphous blob that's kind of, it's boiling. It's never so small that nothing is happening. It's all very, it's like Mercury in 0G. That's what it looks like in all of the examples that I've seen visually of the singularity before the Big Bang. And then, of course, in order to show the Big Bang, you have to remove yourself from the universe in order to view it from an external view. And so that's why everyone always talks about, well, especially creationists and anyone that doesn't believe in the age of the universe, they say, how could something that explodes make anything? When if I take a stick of dynamite and I put it in your bedroom and I blow it up, it's not going to suddenly turn into a 747. It's chaos. It's entropy. It's the second law of thermodynamics, blah, blah, blah. And I understand all of the pointlessness of all of those. But part of the problem is the fact that unless you actually study it, unless you can actually wrap your brain around it, and it's hard to do, you're going to look at the YouTube video, or, you're going to look at the Discovery Channel special about the Big Bang, and you're going to see a large explosion, and then stuff forms out of it, and you're going to be a little confused. So I can understand that. So again, I think that the problem is that with time, if nothing changes, or if nothing is changing, then there is no time, right? If you remove time, if everything suddenly froze and nothing was moving, would time still exist? No, in my opinion. And maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong, because it actually, anyway. So Dual, thank you very much for helping to explain that. I think that I'm getting there. It's still just outside of my grasp. And of course, then there's the question of what are we expanding into, and that one's a tough one too. But that's where you do talk about. What was it that you said? There was nothing before the Big Bang. You talk about the Big Bang and the Big Crunch and the possibility of it going back and forth. Where did it go? Oh, it's not there. It might be there. I can't read it, or I can't find it. But anyway, so thank you for that response. And I'm going to keep on reading and keep on watching videos, because it's tough. It was kind of like relativity. Relativity, for some strange reason, even though it's extremely complex, but it can be explained extremely simply. Basically, relativity, from, again, my understanding, is that things things change depending on your vantage point. They are relative to your viewing angle and your viewing position. So that kind of is it in a nutshell. But of course, it's much more complex than that. So it's really hard, and it's full of paradoxes and all those other things that seem to not make sense, but they actually do make sense. So anyway, it is the way that it is, and it's a lot. It's a lot to take in, especially when you don't start thinking about those types of abstract concepts until you're in your 20s and your 30s, which is my case. I first read anything about Einstein. I don't think we even talked about relativity at all in high school, and probably not, because I didn't take any kind of astronomy class. I actually didn't even take any general science classes. I took biology my freshman year, and then I took anatomy and physiology, and that actually fulfilled all of my science credits. And also, I don't even think my school really offered anything more than that, other than I think there wasn't another biology class. There was a natural sciences, which I actually really wish that I would have taken, because I'm pretty sure that they talked about, plate tectonics and volcanology and biodiversity and those kinds of things, as opposed to really choosing one subject. And I have always really enjoyed pop science. one of the things that I've heard Carl Sagan was always accused of was bringing science into the pop culture and kind of diluting it for the masses. That it was taking raw science and making it flashy and showy and simple and simplified, and people didn't like him for that. And this is something I read somewhere or saw somewhere, so take that with a grain of salt. But nonetheless, that was the kind of science that I actually really enjoyed. I loved watching National Geographic specials when I was a kid. Discovery Channel was awesome back when it actually showed science shows. History Channel, because it would every once in a while dive into some science and, teach you the history of the heliocentric universe and all of those kinds of things. Or not universe, heliocentric solar system. And it was really great. That was the kind of science that I really enjoyed. I really, really loved pop science, and I loved that general broad, hey, did you guys know that all of the continents used to be together in one, and it was called Pangea? It's like, that was awesome to me, finding that kind of stuff out and learning about dinosaurs and this and that and the other. So I always really enjoyed the broad science, the pop science. Much more than I enjoyed actually diving into any specific thing. And so part of the problem with that is that when you're going to a Christian high school, even in a biology class, you're not going to learn anything about evolution. So I learned nothing about evolution. And so having to learn evolution, once I finally got old enough to get out from under that religious shell and see that there are other things out there. And that's what here's a little bit of commentary. And this is something that, this isn't me minimizing my view of Christianity and the way that and creationism and those sorts of things. I'm not downplaying the insanity of it at all. But I want people, and I've mentioned this before, but I really want people to understand that a lot of the people that you immediately jump to the conclusion that they're ignorant and like willfully ignorant and stupid, and that the views that they hold are totally wrong and vapid, and that they have no basis in reality. They may have no basis in reality, but it's real to them because they have spent their entire lives sheltered by these things. And we talk about it and we say, hey, you've got the internet. If you've got the internet, then, what's the saying? The internet is where religions go to die. And if you've got the internet, well, then you can learn anything that you need to and want to about the world, and you can see that the world is so much bigger. Well, you got to remember that there are a lot of parents out there that will keep their kids off of the internet. What is it? The devil's box? Is that what people call it? Because it's all pornography and evolutionism. And those are horrible things to people that want to raise their children to continue along in their willful ignorance, and they're trying to protect their kids. And I don't want to hold it against them that they're trying to do the best for their children. But the problem is that they themselves are no longer seeking knowledge. They themselves are no longer receiving any kind, or looking for any kind of correction to the things that they believe. They read it once and that's it. You see it all the time with creationists, and they talk about finding the Tyrannosaurus Rex with bone marrow still viable and unpetrified. What was it? Ian Juby? No, it wasn't Ian Juby. What was it? Oh, I don't know, some guy that claims that they went up to Alaska and found a bunch of unfossilized dinosaur bones. And it's like, okay, first of all, if you found a lot of unfossilized dinosaur bones, show them. Where are they? It's like, there are more than just you that would like to see this. But they keep talking about these same kinds of stories over and over again. You see it with Kent Hovind, and you watch his old presentations, and then you see Eric Hovind doing the exact same presentations. And it's like, we're 20 years into the future here, and you're telling us that you have not been able to find any new information whatsoever, and you're also spouting the wrong information. It's like when anybody pops up and says, here's my objection to atheism, or here's why I believe that my God is real, and they give their argument for it, and they're given an answer that says, this is why that argument doesn't stand. And they go, here is why I believe in my God. And they give the same exact shit. And everyone just kind of shakes their heads and says, what is the point of you even talking? What is the point of you bringing it up And trying to have a discussion with someone, if you're not willing to accept the fact that there are actually answers to the questions that you say, or that you have, when you have an objection to atheists having no morals, when you're given an answer that explains to you why atheists do have morals, you ignore it and you say, nope, it's not possible. Without God, you can't possibly have morals. And so you just keep on keeping on. And when you do that, you are simply turning off the conversation, because nobody wants to have those conversations with you. I've seen it time and time again with people. They will get into a conversation with someone will ask the question, they will give them the answer to the question, and then they will just turn around and ask the same exact question all over again, like you hadn't even talked. And why would anyone want to waste their time? They've already wasted enough time having to explain something to you that's easily researchable via the internet, and this is where I'm talking about adults, not children at this point. But it's easily researchable. If you actually look for the answer, you can find the answers to this. And it boggles my mind that the people will ask questions putting on the fake air of actually wanting to have those questions answered, but they don't really want to have those questions answered. They don't want to deal with it, because that would require them to change their beliefs. And changing your beliefs is very hard for pretty much everybody. It is tough. I mean, even though a lot of atheists and skeptics will sit there and say, no, if you present me with evidence to the contrary, I will change my mind. Yes, you are right. And I mean, any good skeptic is going to change their mind when presented with evidence that proves their previous position incorrect. I completely and totally agree that any good skeptic is going to do that. But because there are so many other things that are involved, especially when it comes to things like ego, sometimes it's kind of hard to do that. When I was presented with the arguments against the existence of God, I accepted that those arguments were valid. I completely and totally did, because I listened to them and I said, you know what, that's completely and totally right, but I believe on faith. And so I fell back on the whole faith thing, and I fell back on my ego in the sense that I can't have possibly been wrong for 30 plus years of my life. There's no way. So anyway, I don't remember what the point of this was, other than just, it drives me nuts when people are not willing to listen to the answers that you give them. And that's why, perfect example, I got caught up in a conversation with somebody about taxing the churches. And I didn't believe, my conclusion was, I don't think we should tax the churches because of blank. And I got into a conversation with someone and they said, it doesn't sound like you really know what you're talking about. They weren't rude about it by any means. But they just said, it just doesn't seem like you've done enough research on it in order to have an informed opinion. And I said, you know what? You are completely and totally and accurately correct. I know for a fact that I do not know enough about this subject in order to have the view that I have, or in order to have any view whatsoever. And so I actually spent an entire afternoon, which I realized, yes, an entire afternoon may not be enough for some people, but when you have the internet at your disposal and you spend a few hours on the internet, you can at least get a better idea of what you're talking about. And so then I sat down and I came to the conclusion at the end of my research and at the end of me looking up all of the things that the church was getting for free by not having to pay for taxes, and all of the things that were being paid for by our taxes. My end result was I completely and totally flip-flopped, and I changed my mind. And while there is the possibility that I am still wrong and that the church shouldn't be taxed, I really can't see any objection to that. I can't see any objection that I would be willing to accept, because I now have an informed opinion, and now I understand what is all behind it and how much more there is to it. So, yes, there are still objections. Yes, there are still some things that I'm like, well, that could be a good objection, but nonetheless. But my point is that it was hard for me. It's not hard for me, actually, especially now, becoming an atheist and finding out that so much of my life has been a lie. So much of my life has been just wrong. It's not, I haven't been living a lie. Well, whatever. However you want to put it. So much of my life has been what I thought was real is wrong. And what I thought was true is false. That I have become so much more of a skeptic. I've mentioned it before. I'm no longer really stuck in conspiracy theories. I used to believe almost all conspiracy theories. And while I will admit that there probably are some truths to most of the conspiracy theories out there, pharmaceutical companies is a big one that people object to. And I agree that they probably are doing some things that are shifty and shady, but that's not so much pharmaceutical company as much as it's just corporations. It's them trying to make as much money as they possibly can through whatever means necessary. So you put us in a capitalistic society and then expect everybody to behave according to the rules that the rest of us are expected to follow, and it's just not going to happen. You're always going to have people taking advantage of other people, and you're always going to have people and businesses and corporations, which technically are people under a Supreme Court ruling and all that crap. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. I don't want to get into that, even though I already did. But I'm backing out. So, living my entire life knowing that, or finding out that so much of the stuff that I learned was incorrect has gotten me to the point where I'm like, you know what, I'm going to take that with a grain of salt, every single thing. And the number of things that are stuck in my head that I can't get out, that I almost spit out, and I'm like, wait, I'm going to go look this up on the internet real quick and see if this is even true. See if, one of the big ones that's the first one that popped in my head when I tried to think of one was the missing day. I don't know how many of you have ever heard about this, but when Joshua, I'll say Joshua, when Joshua, not blew the horns, that was Jericho, but when Joshua needed another day, because the sun was going down and they were still in the middle of the battle with whoever the hell, the Amalekites or whatever, and God stopped the sun in the sky. And so obviously you've got your physics objections, which is if the earth stopped, it would rip itself apart and the moon would go flying off. And if the sun stopped, then you've got some other problems too. I mean, it doesn't work. It doesn't work in a physical world. But I was taught that, they found the missing day, that NASA sent a spaceship up to somewhere and they got it up into space and they looked at their calculations and they were like, whoa, wait, hang on a second. Things are off. Why are they off? And then they went through and they did the math and they found out that everything was exactly a day off. And that was because God kept the sun still in the sky for an extra day back in biblical times. And so they found that missing day in the Bible. And, oh, glory be to God. Everybody praise Jesus. Hallelujah. And I believed that. I believed that forever until finally I actually had to read where someone brought it up. I didn't even go looking for the answer to that one. That one just came up in my perusing through the internet. And that was basically, there's no cosmic calendar. If a day did happen to go missing 10,000 years ago, that doesn't change how things are now. While, yes, that would change things in a very minuscule way, the moon is still going to, as long as God doesn't step in and jack with shit again, the moon's going to be where we're pretty sure the moon's going to be, whether a day is missing from 10,000 years ago or not. Because that's based on our observations from the course of the past 2,000 years or however long. So, and then, the space or the moon dust arguments and not enough moon dust for a 13 billion, 14 billion year old universe and a 4.5 billion year old Earth and moon. So, anyway, because there was so much of that was pounded into my head over the years, and it was interesting. I mean, I told you earlier, I was really into the pop science of things, and if you told me that NASA shot a rocket up into the sky, I'm like, yeah, and then you keep going with the story, and it turns out that they missed their target, and it's because there was a missing day in the Old Testament, and that confirms the Bible. I'm going to believe that because I believed that the Bible was true and accurate. And then you're telling me that NASA, something I really think is awesome, is, jack something up because the godless heathen astronauts and astrophysicists forgot to factor in the Bible's missing day. I'm going to believe it. I mean, you just believe those things. And so I don't even know what the point of any of this was. Now I'm just laughing at myself. But being a skeptic, becoming an atheist has helped me to become a skeptic. I don't really believe in conspiracy theories anymore, and it's a nice thing. It's a good feeling because people start talking about conspiracy theories, and I'm just like, shut up. It's like there's a possibility that you're right, but you haven't provided the evidence. You have thrown out speculations and hearsay and rumors and arguments from incredulity. There it is. I can only say that if I spit that one out slowly. Arguments from ignorance. I mean, it's just, I don't know how else this could have happened. Therefore, grassy knoll. Actually, the JFK one, I'm still pretty sure there was a shooter there. Grassy knoll, that is. Anyway, so moving on. This is going to be really disjointed, so I apologize. But to Chris, you sent me 2 emails, and this is kind of what I was talking about earlier. I am not by any means saying please don't send me emails. I love getting the emails, and reading the emails was awesome. But you wrote a lot. You're like me when I start writing. So, yep, you saw that, and I replied, and it's funny because you actually say something about that in your email in the very first, what's that thing called? Paragraph, that's what they are, where you said that responding to so many people is something I won't be able to maintain as I become more popular, and you're also sure that I will become more popular, and thank you very much. If I need to reply, etc., responding to your invitation to make observations of your first 2 podcasts. So you live in Thailand. That's actually really cool, dude. I have never lived in an Eastern or a Far East land. When I was a kid, we lived in Holland for 4 years back in the 80s when my dad was in the Air Force. Well, when my dad was active duty in the Air Force. And then we lived in Sicily for about a year and a half in the late 90s, or late 80s, early 90s. And I was actually talking to somebody at work about that today, and I was talking about there is the potential, so those of you that are from Europe, it's not going to help you out all that much, Chris, but those of you that are from Europe, I will be in Europe next summer of 2014. I'll be there with my family, but not exclusively with my family. I have to determine how much time I'm going to be there, and then I'll either spend a few days ahead of my family there or a few days after my family is there, but we're all gonna try and get together for 4 or 5 days of solid. Okay, here's the 4 or 5 days that everybody needs to be in Holland. Let's spend some time checking out where we went to, all the old haunts and this and that and the other. And then if you want to go anywhere else, to France or England or Germany or Italy or anywhere, whatever, you can do whatever you want to before or after. Just make sure you're here on these 4 days, which I thought was a really great idea. And it is a lot better than the guided tour that I actually suggested. Although I did suggest that we do a guided tour for like 3 or 4 days through all of Europe and then just stop and end in Amsterdam and just say, okay, now 3 or 4 more days in Amsterdam, everybody hang out, do whatever, go around all the places we went to. But anyway, none of that has anything to do with anything other than the fact that I will be in Europe next year, and I'm going to try and actually get to somewhere in London, if for no other reason, because everybody in the UK, it seems, is centered around-ish London. If you're not centered around London, I will let you all know well in advance so that you can get your asses to London so that we can all meet up in a pub somewhere and have way too much to drink, because that's fun. And yes, so Chris, I don't know how I'm going to really respond to this other than to read it out loud and actually talk. You mention my breakdown of all of the different, the 4 horsemen. And you also mention Aaron Raw and Thunderfoot and Potholer 54 and Pat Condell from YouTube and other places, the skeptic conventions and that sort of thing. I really did like how you broke down the 4 horsemen. Hitchens is the vicious, Dennett calm and reflective, Dawkins the one that cannot help but show his incredulity when he's dealing with the likes of Ray Comfort or Ted Haggard or William Lane Craig or Kent Hovind, and you like Sam Harris the best, and you're a fan of Carl Sagan. Me too. And I still have yet to go all the way back and watch all of the Cosmos, mostly because the first episode, takes a really long time to actually get going. And listening, unless you really, really, really love him, you can't really listen to Carl Sagan for very long before you start talking like him or you just start making fun of how he talks. I really like him as well. I think his books are excellent. I've read most of The Cosmos and part of Demon Haunted World, and I've read Contact probably 3 times, although that was really an astonishing ending to Contact to me. I saw the movie first, and then I read the book, and I really liked the movie, and I still like the movie. I think it's strange, obviously, because it's in the movie. Those of you that haven't seen it, if you haven't seen it, I recommend that you go and watch it, even though I'm getting ready to spoil it for you. So keep that in mind. But Ellie's character, she bases her entire everything on evidence through the entire movie. And then she gets to the end, and she's forced, because of the reworking of the book into the movie, she's the only one that actually goes through the rings. She's the only one that goes to this galactic hub and talks to the aliens who show up to her as basically they morph into whatever they're in your head, and it's all telepathy. It doesn't exactly explain which one is happening, but she sees her dad, and in the movie, she's spent this entire movie talking about evidence and science, and if she doesn't believe, that was the whole conflict, was the religion versus science, and the religion versus skepticism, and faith versus evidence. And Ellie was always the one that was on the side of evidence and skepticism, and then in the end, she has an experience that she then has to try to convince everyone else of, even though even though she has absolutely no evidence. Now, the biggest problem that I have with the way that movie ends is not the fact that she suddenly becomes this, not a Jesus character, more of a doubting Thomas. She becomes the doubting Thomas that in the end, she goes through the rings and she sees her dad and she has this experience, and she now believes. She believes in something that she has no proof. She now has faith. And I didn't like that they did that, even though in the book they sort of did that, because in the book, she actually comes back with the palm frond. She went through the rings with 3 other people, and they all had their own experiences. And so there were actually, when they came back, there were actually 4 people. So even though no time had passed from when they all dropped through the rings. It just appeared, and again, in the movie and in the book. There's a big giant machine that's built. They put all these people into a pod. They put 4 people into the pod. In the book, they put just 1 person into the pod. In the movie, they drop them through this machine, and it catches them on the other side. They just fall straight through these concentric rings that are spinning. And they fall straight through to the observer, but to the people that are inside the pod, relativity kicks in, and they travel all the way to the other side of the galaxy and come back, and it's like no time has passed whatsoever. I think that's relativity. I would guess it would be. So anyway, so in the book, they have 4 people, and so those 4 people are kind of, well, they're the reinforcement. They're the ones that say, what you experienced, while it was specific to you, because each one of the 4 had their own experiences, but they were all there together. They knew that they were all there, and they all enjoyed it. Or they all enjoyed it. They were all really happy. They enjoyed their time meeting the aliens, because the aliens took on, like the love of their life, or the teacher that they always admired extremely well. And, of course, with Ellie's character, the alien took the form of her dad. But she also got to come home with evidence. She brought evidence home. And so with the 4 of them being able to talk to each other and confirm that they actually went somewhere and something actually did happen, and being able to hold the palm frond in her hand and say, look, I've got this, explain this, where did this come from if I didn't? And so she isn't made to believe everything completely and totally on faith in the book. But she is made out to have to accept that everything was on faith in the movie. And that's the only real criticism that I have of the movie. Because I know a lot of people thought that Contact sucked. A lot of people thought Contact sucked. And a lot of people think that Contact was one of the worst movies ever made. I am not of that ilk. I really, really enjoyed it. And if nothing else, turn it on with surround sound on, and when she starts hearing the signal for the first time, you'll know it because she's sitting on her car, she's all pissed off, and she's sitting out in the middle of the very large array in New Mexico, and she's listening to her headphones. At that point, crank that puppy up to 11 because that is so awesome. That sound effect and the sound effect of the baby monitors from the aliens in the movie Signs, again, another movie that I actually enjoyed, but it's not very good. And I really hated the ending of that one. But anyway, the baby monitor alien sounds in Signs and Ellie listening to the alien signal from space, from Vega, some of the most awesome sound effects, in my opinion, of all time on movies. It's right up there with blowing up the Empire State Building in Independence Day. That pause right before that vacuum as all the air is sucked out and then just boom. Anyway. Hell, what was I talking about? Right. So here's the flip side of that. Then in the book, she actually finds evidence of an intelligently designed universe. Because she has a program that's running Pi, and she's running all of everything for Pi, and she's written the program so that, I mean, it's running through all of the, I don't know what those are, the integers of Pi, all of the places of Pi. Anyway, it's running through all of those, and she's written the program to look for any kind of pattern, and, base 8, base 16, base 10, all those different patterns to try and find if there is any pattern within Pi. And she finds out that, 16 trillion digits down the line, if on base 14 or something like that, it actually creates a perfect circle of ones and zeros or something like that. And so in the book, it finds evidence for intelligent design, and that's how the book ends. Which I thought was kind of strange, and now that I'm talking about it, I'd really like to go and find out what Carl Sagan had to say about that book, and why it was written that way, because it was kind of strange. I mean, when I first read it, I wasn't an atheist. I really enjoyed the book. It did talk about a lot of different things with the whole faith versus evidence. And, and that was part of it, was at the end, it was like, there is a God because there's at least intelligent design, if nothing else, which I hadn't even heard of intelligent design, and I had already thrown out young Earth creationism, but I did believe in old Earth creationism, kind of the deist mindset of the eternal clockmaker. And, God kicked it all into motion and started to intervene a little while later, which I realized the objection from Christopher Hitchens, which talks about, for 200,000 years of human evolution, or 2 million years of human evolution, the powers that be in heaven stood by and watched while we died in childbirth painfully, starved, killed each other, did this, did that, did the other, and then finally, one day, God said, it's time for me to intervene. And actually did something about saving humanity from themselves. And Christopher Hitchens, yeah, I miss him sometimes. Sometimes I'll watch his debates and I'll be like, dude, you suck. You really suck at debates. The one that he did with crap. I think I tried to talk about this one other time. It was not reverend. Well, he was a reverend. Anyway, he didn't actually present any arguments. He just kind of kept throwing out. I don't want to say he kept throwing out the rhetoric, but to a degree, it was kind of very much just all of his comments were just rhetoric. Well, the church sucks because they did bad things like this, and the reverend is going, yeah, but nothing that you're saying is against the existence of a God. It just is simply saying that God's an asshole. And so, do you have anything about the non-existence of God, or are you just going to keep on talking, about all of the bad things that religion has done? And so anyway, not to spit on the man at all, because I think that he did a lot, and especially God is Not Great had a lot to do with my deconversion. So I'm not gonna knock him by any means, but sometimes his debating skills were lacking. but his prose and his writings were most excellent. So anyway, I don't have a clue what I was talking about. That's how quickly I can suddenly forget what I was talking about. Contact, Carl Sagan. I like Carl Sagan. You liked Carl Sagan. I was responding to Chris's email. The first email, I'm not going to make it through. And you do bring up the whole, the definitions thing, which I think is kind of funny because I think it was the last episode of Atheist Impact where I actually said that I'm getting a little bit more relaxed on my definition of people, or my opinion of people that call themselves agnostics. And I still kind of hold to that, just because of the fact that even though I completely and totally understand that Gnosticism has to do with knowledge and theism or atheism has to do with belief, it's tough because there are a lot of people that don't want to make that jump. And I don't, because there are so many people that are in a position where they can't, be it for financial reasons or because they still live at home. When I first became an atheist, I still lived with my parents, and I had moved back with my parents to be closer to family so that I could have their support during a really hard time in my life. I was, I don't want to say I was suicidal, but there were a couple of times that I was afraid that I was going to hurt myself, and I was afraid that I was going to end up in a loony bin. And I many times thought about checking myself into a psych ward just for evaluation, just to make sure that I was not going to hurt myself. And I didn't, and that was good. And so I left Seattle for the first time and moved back to Ohio and was living with my parents. I lived on their property, not in the same house as them. I just had to go inside if I wanted to use any of their cooking equipment, or if I wanted to use the bathroom beyond more than walking out into the field and just right. So anyway, when I first became an atheist, I was living with them, and so I couldn't say anything about it, and I still haven't. And I sometimes feel guilty that I haven't. And then I realized that I can't really feel guilty that I haven't come out, because I'm doing what I can, in my opinion, for my version of activism. In this case, is me letting other people know that there is this other underground, that there are a lot of people that can't come out. I can't be like the thinking atheist right now, because I don't want everyone that I know in the real world to know who I am. There is one person that I worked with recently that actually knows my online persona, and he's in agreement with the majority of my positions, and so there's no threat there. I don't feel like him knowing who I am in the real world and him knowing who I am on the internet is actually a bad thing, because I'm not afraid that he's going to betray me in any way or let anybody know, hey, I know this guy and this is who this guy is. So I'm not worried about that. But sometimes I do worry about it. Now, my mom and I were talking via text or email the other day, and her final email was, okay, love you, keep your eyes on Jesus, bye. And that was the first time she'd even said anything even remotely religious in a while. Most of the other emails were, they would just end with the normal, love you, mom, that kind of thing. And this one like I said, had been a while, and then she spits out the, keep your eyes on Jesus, which is always something that she's always said. And I just found it a little strange. It was a little awkward, because it just had been so long since my mom had said anything religious towards me. And that's why sometimes I'm not so afraid. I'm not afraid of telling my family. I'm afraid of their long-term reaction to it, because one of two things will happen. Either my family will accept it and say, okay, whatever, we're going to pray for you because we're pretty much sure that we're going to be able to get you back. This is just a phase. My family does still, I'm the youngest, and so my family does still kind of look at me and say, you're the youngest, you're the baby, you're the one that's still, experimenting with life and trying to figure out what it is that you want to do with your life, and yada, yada, yada. Whereas, my sisters are both married, they have kids, and their husbands, one of them has a career, the other one is still chasing dreams, even though they have many kids, and he needs to stop chasing dreams. So, hey, if you're listening to this, stop chasing your dreams. It's done with dreams right now. Raise your children and get out of your anyway. So, but the other side, or the other possible reaction, I mean, sure, there's myriad reactions that could happen, but I really believe that the other reaction would be more violent, not in a physical violent sort of way, but in an extremely emotionally violent way. I think that there would be a lot of guilt trips. I think that there will be a lot of proselytizing. My mom may actually drop even further into depression than she already does from time to time. She lacks the feelings of self-worth that she then passed on to at least me. And so telling my mom that I don't believe as she believes and I don't believe as she raised me to believe is the same as me saying, Mom, you did a really shitty job raising me. To my mom, that's how it is. Because she thinks that, raise up a child in the way they should go and they will never part from the ways, their ways, whatever. And spare the rod, spare the child, and all this other crap. That's how they raised us. They raised us with the belief that if they indoctrinated us enough, we would stay true to our religion. And that was more important than anything else. It was more important than, I wanted to play football when I was in grade school, and I really wanted to go to the public school. So I could play football, because I knew that I could play football. I knew that I could at least run around and, run into people. That's what defense is, right? I knew that was what I could do. I knew I could do it well, but my school, because it was a private Christian school, we didn't have enough money and we didn't have the insurance and all that kind of stuff in order to have a football team. So if we didn't have a football team, I couldn't play football at that school. And what I really wanted to do, and I didn't have dreams or delusions of grandeur when it came to football, I just wanted to play football. And that was the thing that I was really passionate about. I wanted to play football. And they were like, nope. Sorry, you got to go to this school because it's Christian school, not that public school shit. You're not going over there. And it's like, okay, well, could you try? I mean, hello. There was no encouragement whatsoever for the things that I wanted to do, because it was viewed as those are the decisions of a child. And the decisions of a child are unimportant because I'm the parent and I know what's best. And I understand that most parents do the best that they can. And I understand that my parents did the best that they could. I just really wish that my parents would have taken a little bit more time to evaluate the claims that were being made by their religion and the claims that were being made by their pastors. It's sad. It really is, because there were a lot of things that I was not encouraged to do. And I actually mentioned this to someone online earlier today. I said that what I wanted more than anything was to be taught how to think, not what to think. Because if I'm taught how to think and I'm given the critical thinking skills that are necessary for life, then it will benefit me in so many different areas other than just religion. And I'm not even saying I wish that my parents had not raised me as a Christian, because, again, in my family, that was a predestination kind of thing. You were going to be raised as a Christian. You were going to be a Christian. But had they given me the evidence, even if the evidence was wrong, had they given me the evidence and said, this is why we believe what we believe, and we want you to apply these same critical thinking skills, and we want you to ask for evidence for claims. We want you to, it happens all the time in churches. Someone will come into a church and they'll say, well, this is what I believe. And someone will say, well, why is it that you believe that? And they'll say, well, based on this interpretation of this verse. And someone else will look at it and go, well, that's not the interpretation that I'm getting. And so you have those conflicts in churches all the time. You have some critical thinking skills that are actually taught, because otherwise you have to accept every single claim that every single person comes up with, because that's their interpretation. My mom, I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but my mom thinks that Roman Catholics are crazy and thinks that, Peter wasn't actually the one that was set up to be the first pope, because that's not really what those verses are talking about. And I told my mom, it's like, well, Mom, you've got a lot of Catholics out there over the years that are going to disagree with you. And your version is your version. But anyway, that's all an aside. My desire would have been to have been taught how to think, not what to think. And also to be encouraged to pursue the things that I was passionate about when I was younger. When I was 10 or 11, I wrote my first diary entry. I think I was 10. It was 1987, so I guess I was 9. My first diary entry was pretty much, my dog had puppies, and I think I said that I had a girlfriend. Maybe I didn't have a girlfriend. At 9 years old, I was actually very concerned about not having a girlfriend because when I was in kindergarten, I had at least 2. And when I was in 1st and 2nd grade, I had at least 3. I was a Mac back in those days. 4th grade, I had a girlfriend that was in the 8th grade. That was crazy. Just crazy, I tell you. But anyway, so I started writing. I mean, my very first diary entry, seriously, it was my dog had puppies. I don't have a girlfriend, and we're moving again. And I didn't write again for another year or so. But then I started writing, and I started writing about what was going on in my life, and I started writing about the girl that I liked that week, and then I started writing about why I liked that girl that week, and then I started writing about why I talked about the girl that I liked that week so much, and that then led to, a little bit more thinking and a little bit less just documentation of my history. And yet, my parents never encouraged that at all. And I think part of it was because, it's that gender roles thing. In a Christian household, and a conservative Christian household, generally speaking, the boys play with G.I. Joes, except in my house because they were too violent, and the girls play with Barbies, except they don't, because if the boys get a hold of the Barbie dolls and take off their clothes, then they'll learn about sex, and that's a bad thing. But anyway, I wore blue, my sisters wore pink. That was my family. And writing in a diary was a girl thing to do. And so it wasn't really ever encouraged. And now I look at what I like to do, and I look at what I enjoy doing, and I look at what I am passionate at doing, and I look at what I'm good at doing. And one of those things is writing, because I never stopped writing. But I was never encouraged by my family to do that, to pursue my writing career, or to pursue writing as a hobby that I needed to hone or wanted to hone and get better. So to you parents out there, and I don't have any kids yet, but please do not ignore my advice to you simply because I don't have kids, but teach your kids how to think and not what to think. The critical thinking skills that you teach them are going to benefit them in so many areas. If you're a theist out there and you're listening to me, don't cram your religion down your kids' throats. Just teach them what you believe and why you believe it. And if in that process you find the flaws in your arguments, don't pass them on. Please, for your God's sake, please don't pass them on. I would greatly appreciate that. Even if one person doesn't pass that crap on. And I know I just insulted you, and I would apologize, but I am not sorry. Well, amazingly enough, you get me talking and I can just keep on going. So here we are at 57 minutes or so, 58 minutes with the intro, I think. And I'm trying to wind down. Chris, I apologize. I didn't even get halfway through your first email, let alone your second email. But let it be known that I did read it. I greatly appreciate it. And if by any chance there's any way that I can sit down and have enough time to actually type out a response that's at least the length of the emails that you sent me, I promise you I will do so. To anyone else that's listening that has sent me anything on Facebook or on Twitter or on YouTube or just email, I love you all, and I thank you very much for the awesome response that this has had, and I'm still trying to get some other stuff together. It's just really hard. Like I said, I've got a busy life, and everything that I'm doing takes up a lot of time, but I am going to do my damnedest to actually make this a little bit more interesting and get some other people going. And I think I mentioned this once before, but if anybody knows how to get a hold of Seth Andrews, the Thinking Atheist, I think it'd be pretty cool if he and I hooked up. And I've got family in Tulsa, so I could always fly down there and hang out with family and meet up with Seth. So anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I hope that your Sunday is as blasphemous and enjoyable as mine is probably going to be. All right, take care, everybody.